What crossed your mind once that scared even you? I used to work in a high-rise building, the kind with 30-plus floors, mirrored walls, and quiet, awkward elevator rides. There was this guy in accounting, Steve. He was the textbook office creep. Always made weird comments to women, always too close, too smiley. HR had talked to him multiple times, but nothing changed. One morning, I got in the elevator alone. Doors started to close. Then, ding, Steve stepped in. I froze. He smiled, said something about my shoes. We were going to the 22nd floor, but somewhere around floor 10, I looked at him and thought, no one would stop me if I just hit the emergency button and pushed him out the doors when they opened. Not because I'm violent, but because I knew he deserved something. And no one else was doing anything. Of course I didn't do it. I just got off one floor early. But that thought stayed with me, because I realized how fast justice can twist into fantasy when you feel powerless long enough. I was 22 when I almost jumped. I had lost my job. My girlfriend had left. My family was tired of checking in. I felt like a burden to everyone, even my therapist. I stood on the roof of a parking garage one night and just waited, not crying, not panicking, just still. And I remember thinking, if I go now, no one will have to pretend anymore. They can stop acting like I matter. I imagined my funeral, not in a morbid way, more like a schedule. Who would speak? Who would fake tears? Who would feel guilty for not answering my last message? And I felt peace. But then a text popped up from my little sister. Just a meme, some dumb cat joke. And I laughed. Like, actually laughed. I climbed down, went home, ate a granola bar, slept for 14 hours. No one ever knew how close I was. But I think about that version of me sometimes. And I'm glad he never got the last word. When I was 16, I hated how I looked. Not in the usual teenage way. I mean visceral hatred. I'd stare into the mirror at 2 a.m. and want to break it. My jaw looked wrong. My teeth, uneven. My skin felt like a costume I couldn't remove. Nothing fit. Nothing matched who I thought I was inside. I'd stare at my reflection and think, what if I just clawed it off? Like peeled it. Started over. There was no logic to it. Just pure rage. Toward my own face. My own existence. I never told anyone. Not even in therapy. Because people expect your darkest thoughts to be about others. But mine were always about destroying me. I live in a city where the subway platform is always crowded. People pressed shoulder to shoulder, rushing, scrolling, not watching where they're going. One morning, I was late for work, stressed, sleep-deprived, and barely functioning. A guy behind me shoved past me to get to the edge. Didn't apologize. Just huffed and muttered something under his breath. I stood behind him, watching him teeter near the edge of the platform. And I thought, one push. No one would see. It could look like a stumble, an accident. I didn't even know him. He hadn't done anything unforgivable. But the thought was there, for just a second. It passed. He got on the train. I got on the next one. But it made me realize how thin the line is between human and impulse, and how terrifying it is to know what you're capable of in the wrong second. A year ago, my brother got married to a woman who used to be my best friend. He didn't steal her. There was no cheating. But she and I had history. Deep, painful, unresolved. We had a falling out years ago when she spread rumors about me during college. It wrecked a relationship I was in, cost me friends, and almost pushed me into a breakdown. She never apologized, just rebranded herself as sweet and wholesome. And somehow, she ended up with my brother. I kept quiet to protect him. At their wedding, they asked me to give a toast. Family tradition. I stood there, holding a glass, smiling on the outside. Inside, the thought came, sharp and hot. Tell everyone what she did. Humiliate her. Right here. Strip her of the mask. I pictured it. The gasps. The confusion. My brother's face. I didn't do it. I gave the safe speech, laughed in all the right places. But as I clinked my glass with hers later, I thought, you don't deserve this life. You just know how to play nice better than I do. I'm still holding that truth. Maybe forever. I was about 13 when I realized my dad didn't love me. Not in a dramatic way, he never hit me or screamed, but he was cold, withholding. He'd forget birthdays, miss school plays, roll his eyes when I cried. Our dog, Max, got more affection than I ever did. One night, I walked into the kitchen and saw him kneel to give Max his food. He kissed the dog on the head, kissed him, and something snapped. I looked at the bowl of kibble in his hand and thought, What if I laced it with bleach? Just a drop. Would he even notice it was me? I didn't. Of course I didn't. I loved that dog more than anything. But that moment wasn't really about hurting Max. It was about hurting my dad, by taking away the only thing he ever seemed to love. I still carry shame about that thought. Not because I had it, but because it felt so logical in the moment. And that scared me more than anything. I used to babysit for a couple down the street. They had a newborn and a toddler, and they paid well. Quiet house, snacks in the fridge, easy work. One night, I was rocking the baby while the toddler slept in the other room. I turned on the baby monitor camera and flipped it to the toddler's room. He was just lying there, silent, awake, staring at the ceiling. Something in me cracked. I thought, he's going to grow up into someone awful. Maybe a rapist. Maybe a killer. You never know who people become. What if you could stop it before it starts? The thought horrified me. It came out of nowhere, like a whisper from something ancient and broken. I held the baby tighter and cried quietly. I've never told anyone that story. Not because I'm ashamed I thought it, but because I know how easily thoughts can become truths if you stop being afraid of them. A few years ago, I applied for a job I really wanted. Dream job. Months of preparation. Several rounds of interviews. I even bought a blazer I couldn't afford. I made it to the final two. Then I found out who the other candidate was. Her name was Taylor. I didn't know her personally, but we had mutuals. I looked her up, saw her Instagram, her Twitter, and one night I scrolled too far back, way back, until I found something. A tweet from 6 years ago. Dumb, inappropriate, offensive. The kind that could sink a person if it landed in the right inbox. I stared at it for a long time, and I thought, if I screenshot this and send it anonymously, maybe I get the job. Maybe she learns a lesson. No one will know it was me. I didn't do it. She got the offer, and I'm proud of the choice I made. But some twisted part of me still wonders, if the roles were reversed, would she have made the same choice? When I was in 7th grade, I was relentlessly bullied, pushed in the hallway, called names, mocked for my clothes, my voice, my weight. Teachers saw it. No one did anything. One day, we had a fire drill. Everyone filed outside to the field, laughing and messing around while I stood alone. As we walked back in, I noticed the janitor had left the keyring in the electrical panel near the stairwell. Something clicked in my brain. I stared at it for a full minute. I thought, if I just twist the wrong breaker and walk away, maybe something burns. Maybe I disappear. Maybe they do. I didn't do it. I just kept walking. But that moment scared me more than anything the bullies ever said, because I knew the real danger wasn't them. It was how close I was to becoming someone no one would have recognized. Years ago, I lived in a crumbling apartment complex with paper-thin walls. My upstairs neighbor had a newborn. The baby cried. Constantly. Day, night, 3 a.m., 6 a.m., middle of Zoom calls. I don't think it stopped for 3 straight weeks. At first, I understood. Babies cry, parents are exhausted. But eventually, it broke me. I hadn't slept more than 2 hours at a time. I was failing deadlines. My hands shook from exhaustion and stress. And one night, around 4 a.m., when the crying started again, I thought, what if I went up there and did something? Just made it stop. 1 second. 1 act. And I imagined it. In detail. Not because I'm a monster, but because my brain was desperate to escape. Of course, I didn't do anything. I curled up in the corner of my kitchen and cried. And the next day, when I saw the mom in the hallway, eyes swollen, hair matted, I felt ashamed. She wasn't the enemy. Sleep deprivation was. I was 19 when my dad died suddenly. A heart attack in the driveway. 1 minute he was mowing the lawn, the next minute he was gone. No goodbye, no warning, just silence. The thing is, my dad and I didn't get along. He was strict, cold, never said I love you. He'd yell when I got a B, mock me when I cried. I used to think if he died, I'd finally be free. But when it actually happened, I felt empty, like all the anger had nowhere to go. A week after the funeral, I was in the passenger seat of my mom's car. She was driving, rambling about insurance and life and how we have to move on. I stared out the window, numb, and then the thought came, uninvited, loud. What if I just grabbed the wheel and jerked it right? Not to kill her, not even to kill myself, just to make it stop. The pressure, the noise, the feeling of being trapped in a life I never chose. I didn't do it. I never told her. But for months after, I couldn't ride in cars without picturing it again. And sometimes I still wonder, did that thought come from me? Or from something I didn't survive the moment he died? There's this bridge near my hometown, not huge, but high enough. Beautiful view of the river, especially at sunset. One evening, I went there with my then-girlfriend. We were fighting. Again. One of those quiet, venomous fights where you both pretend you're not trying to hurt each other, but every word is a knife. She walked ahead of me to the edge of the bridge, leaned on the railing, stared out at the water. Her hair was blowing in the wind. She looked so peaceful. And I remember standing behind her just a few feet back and thinking, if I pushed her, it could look like a fall. I didn't want to do it. But the thought came anyway. It wasn't rage. It was curiosity, cold and clinical. Like my brain briefly became someone else's. I remember shaking it off like a chill. I stood still, didn't move, didn't breathe, just waited for it to pass. We broke up a month later. She never knew. But sometimes, when I'm near railings, I still feel it. That brief, terrifying sense of control, like holding chaos on a leash.